Tonight on Reporting Scotland, a court hears that a teenager accused of fatally stabbing a pupil at an Aberdeen school wiped blood off his hands and sobbed after the incident. People in the most expensive houses are to pay more under the First Minister's plans for reform of council tax. There are calls for tackling to be banned in school rugby to prevent serious injury, but the sport says it would destroy the game.
Every week you get hundreds of people in Scotland, thousands of people playing rugby, thousands of people leave the field, there's no injuries there.
Also on the programme, top of the table, Celtic and Aberdeen are both in action tonight. They've squandered opportunities in recent days, so both are hoping for victories. We'll have the latest from Tannadice as the Dons visit Dundee United.
I hope it has a positive impact, but if not, that's fine as well.
Murray tells us what he thinks of being a dad as Britain prepares to defend the Davis Cup. Good evening. A court has heard how a 16-year-old boy accused of fatally stabbing a teenager at an Aberdeen school wiped blood off his hands after the incident. Bailey Gwynn died after being stabbed at the school in October. The accused, who can't be identified for legal reasons, denies murder. Stephen Duff reports from the High Court in Aberdeen.
The end of an emotional day for the family of Bailey Gwynn as they heard more details of the battle to save the 16-year-old's life. The murder trial has already heard how he died after suffering a single penetrating stab wound to the heart. Paramedic Gary Gillespie told how he found Bailey lying in a corridor of Cults Academy. He described him as the palest person he'd ever seen. Mr Gillespie said, as well as looking very pale, Bailey was gasping for breath. He said he'd an obvious wound on the left side of his chest. The symptoms, he said, of a catastrophic loss of blood. Shortly before leaving the school by ambulance, Bailey suffered cardiac arrest. Resuscitation attempts continued until they reached Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, but there was no sign of life. Asked if there was anything more that could have been done, Mr Gillespie replied, no. In the immediate aftermath of the stabbing incident, the 16-year-old boy who's accused of murdering Bailey, who we cannot name for legal reasons, was taken to the head teacher's office. Soon 2 police officers arrived and the accused was handcuffed. Constable Christopher Masson said that the accused voluntarily said to him, "Is he dead? It was just a moment of anger." He then told the officer he'd put the knife in a bin near the school canteen. Deputy head teacher at Cults Academy, David Strang, was with the accused after the stabbing. The accused, he said, wiped blood from his hand using a tissue and handed him a knuckle duster. Earlier, a number of child witnesses had told of seeing the accused with a knife and knuckle duster in the school. One friend of the accused said he didn't believe he was the type of person to engage in violent activity with weapons. A difficult day of evidence for Bailey Gwynn's family. The accused denies murder and other charges of possessing weapons. The trial continues. Stephen Duff reporting Scotland at the High Court in Aberdeen.
The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, wants to increase council tax for those in the most expensive houses if the SNP wins the Holyrood election in May. The Conservatives said it was right to keep the council tax, but Labour said the SNP was breaking a promise to scrap it. Here's our political correspondent, Glenn Campbell.
Nicola Sturgeon's cooked up changes to council tax that should bring in an extra £100 million a year for schools.
Those living in the highest value houses in Scotland will pay more.
How much more? Well, nothing in property bands A to D. £105 a year extra in band E, rising to £207 in band F, £335 in band G, and £517 in the top band, band H, with exemptions for those on low incomes, including pensioners.
We are introducing reforms to the council tax that will ask those who live in the most expensive houses across our country to pay a bit more. The vast majority of people will not pay any more as a result of these changes, and some families with children on the lowest incomes will pay less.
There was a time when the SNP wanted to abolish council tax rather than to reform it. But after 9 years in power, they've decided to keep it after all and to try and make it a bit fairer.
I think we accept the principle that people in large properties should pay a little bit more, but we have to be careful that we're not making more expensive properties more unaffordable.
Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP have won not one but 2 elections on a very clear promise to abolish the council tax. And the SNP have broken that promise today. In fact, the only thing they've abolished is the council tax freeze.
If the SNP avoids rejection at the election, the freeze will be lifted in 2017. That would let councils raise more for local services by putting up tax across all bands. But any increases would be capped at 3% by the Scottish Government.
The SNP seem more determined to take control away from local communities and authorities. They think they know best in this place over my shoulder. I think local communities know better. These plans are insulting and they're timid.
We believe that local government should be much more autonomous. We believe in strengthening local democracy, and that means giving them the powers to raise the money they want to spend on local services.
In future, councils may also be allowed to tax derelict land and development, and they'll get a share of Scottish income tax revenues. But a reformed council tax that makes those in bigger houses pay a bit more is the centrepiece of the SNP's plan. Glenn Campbell, reporting Scotland.
Well, the SNP plan to reform council tax isn't as radical as some had hoped for. Back in 2007, the party planned to replace the tax entirely with a local income tax. And last year, a major report examined several alternatives. As our local government correspondent Jamie McIver reports, those who'd wanted big changes are disappointed.
The council tax helps pay for all sorts of local services, like this gym. But whether it should be reformed or replaced has exercised minds for years. What the SNP proposes is well short of the radical change some campaigned for. This is about reforming the system, not replacing it. The body that represents most councils isn't happy.
I'm really surprised that there's so little being announced. From the point of view of just adjusting the bands, it looks very much to me tinkering around the edges. Something that if that was to deliver equality, and it could have been done some considerable number of years ago.
Last year, a commission set up by the government and COSLA studied local taxation carefully. It came up with detailed options for change. Its recommendations were never binding. Still, some are surprised the SNP isn't being bolder.
We've had a commission on local tax reform which did a really good job. It collected vast amounts of information and evidence, consulted with people throughout Scotland, and concluded that although they didn't come up with a specific that the council tax should end, that the council tax standstill should end anyway, that was an unfair scheme of taxation. And what we have is a council tax with a few bells and whistles on it.
The SNP says the money raised will go on education, maybe helping the children here when they're older. Most people won't pay significantly more council tax under the SNP's plans. The bigger impact will be on those who live in more expensive properties.
Any extra pressure on a family budget is going to be difficult, but at the same time I do appreciate that the councils have been quite cash strapped in the last few years.
I don't have a problem paying tax, but I think anything needs to be justified.
When it comes to any big change, they say no pain, no gain. Just ask at any gym. So is mere reform of the council tax simply an easy option, or is it the better one? Voters get their say in May's election. Jamie McIver, reporting Scotland.
You're watching Reporting Scotland from the BBC. Still to come on tonight's programme, there are calls for tackling to be banned in school rugby to prevent serious injury, but some in the sport say it would destroy the game.
And in sports, we're at Tannadice ahead of a Premiership match, which has implications for the title race and the relegation issue. And we'll hear from Andy Murray on the joys of parenthood and tennis.
The Scottish Government's being accused of depriving the rural economy of hundreds of millions of pounds because of a delay in administering EU payments to farmers. A new computer system is being blamed, but farmers say it's left them with serious cash flow problems. They want ministers to go back to Brussels to agree new payment arrangements. Jackie O'Brien reports.
Livestock prices may have been holding their own at the Dingwall Mart in Rossshire today, but farmers were in no mood to celebrate. Many here are running out of funds and patience with the Scottish Government, which has been unable to pay them outstanding subsidies due to them since last December.
Our business is suffering quite badly, but there's other businesses. I'm hearing horrendous stories now how people are struggling to pay knackery bills to get cows uplifted if they die on the farm. Just the day-to-day cash payments are bad.
The Scottish farming industry is entitled to £400 million from this particular EU subsidy pot, but only £100 million has so far been paid out to less than half the number of Scottish farmers. The government's delay in processing the EU payments are due to problems with a new computer system.
The system is working, just not fast enough, and we accept that. But we have until June the 30th, and I want to get payments out long before then. That's why we're working flat out to get as many payments out this month as we can to our farmers and crofters, because we understand there's very serious cash flow situations out there.
I think Richard Lochhead has lost the confidence of rural Scotland. There's so much money out of the rural economy, which in any other year would have been paid by now. You've got people that are really struggling to make ends meet. You know, this is a mistake. It's a £200 million computer system that's not working.
The Scottish Government could be fined by Europe if it doesn't administer the money by the end of June, and it's being urged to pay up in line with France and Ireland.
That's the double whammy. You know, I think they're trying to make sure everything's right so they don't get penalties, but they're going to fall off the other end and get a penalty anyway. We should do what the Irish guys do, pay the money out, you're going to get a penalty anyway.
This latest crisis comes as farming incomes continue to fall, and amid fears that farmers and crofters in some of Scotland's most disadvantaged areas are the next to have their subsidies stalled. Jackie O'Brien reporting, Scotland, Dingwall.
Now, should tackling be banned in school rugby? More than 70 doctors and academics think so. They've penned an open letter to ministers saying injuries caused by tackling can have lifelong consequences for children. But some schools and coaches are questioning the cause. Lisa Summers reports.
At George Watson's College in Edinburgh, the game of rugby goes hand in hand with the history of the school.
Tackle, present,
It's not compulsory, but the full contact game begins in primary. Teachers say they follow strict guidelines on injuries, particularly concussion.
If we suspect for a second that a child may be concussed, we absolutely follow the general sport concussion guidelines, which would be in practice for any sport in Scotland. We would remove the child from play. We would be liaising with parents. We were making sure that the parent knew exactly what had happened. We then follow that incident up with the medical team at school.
Increasingly, questions are being asked about the long-term health implications of tackles in rugby, and that's led to these health experts calling for an outright ban in schools. They say it's responsible for way more injuries and concussions than any other part of the game.
In the short term with concussion, we're worried about problems with learning, memory loss, headaches, depression, seizures, visual impairments, even hearing impairments. In the long term, we know that there's association with long-term, with repeat concussions, with depression and mental health problems, but also with serious neurological disorders.
He looks in a bit of bother.
Big, crunching tackles have become part of the modern game. Just last week, flanker Blair Cowan was taken off after a clash of heads against Wales. But those at the top of the game say taking tackles out of the youth setup would be detrimental.
If you learn the basics and you learn properly and you're taught properly from a young age, then it means that your techniques and things, you kind of harness them from a young age. You progress along, and as you get bigger and more physical, it's not like all of a sudden you're trying to tackle a big man running at you like a train.
Coaches involved at grassroots level argue there is an element of risk in all sports. James Adam is coach and parent of an 8-year-old son who plays rugby.
Every week you get hundreds of people in Scotland, thousands of people playing rugby, thousands of people leave the field, there's no injuries there. Yes, there's inherent risk in all contact sports, but as a guy who played rugby for years, 20 odd years, I never get injured once tackling somebody.
Last year, the Scottish Government launched new guidelines for rugby and say, if in doubt, sit out. But campaigners will continue to push for a clearer picture of the future of this high-impact sport. Lisa Summers reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
UK counter-terrorism measures make it more difficult for Muslim leaders to combat extremism in their communities. That's the view of the Muslim Council of Scotland. It says the measures prevent people speaking openly and honestly about the issue. The organisation today held a counter-extremism seminar in Glasgow, attended by the Justice Minister, Michael Matheson. It looked at the threat extremism poses to the public and how to better work with the wider community.
This confusion between community relations and security. And when you put these together, there's problems, because as many people has expressed here, they will not talk openly because they think this will be taken as a security issue, whereas we want to build community relations.
56 pupils at a primary in Mulgai are off school with symptoms of norovirus. Parents and carers of children at Clober Primary School have been sent a text by East Dunbartonshire Council to alert them about the outbreak. They've been told if their child exhibits symptoms, they're to be kept off school for 48 hours. The school is being deep cleaned this evening and will be open tomorrow. A look now at other stories from across the country. 2 men and a woman have been charged in connection with an alleged willful fire-raising incident at Dice Police Station in Aberdeen. It happened just before 7:30 yesterday morning. No one was injured. Police say a 41-year-old woman and 2 men aged 23 and 19 have been charged. It's believed an unexploded torpedo found in Scapa Flow in Orkney at the weekend was fired during the attack on HMS Royal Oak in 1939. The ship was sunk by a German U-boat in one of the greatest naval tragedies of World War II. The torpedo was discovered on the seabed during a routine sonar survey. Dog owners are being reminded they must have their pets microchipped from the start of next month. Dogs that haven't been chipped could land their owners with a fine of up to £500. They'll also have to register their details and keep them up to date on a database.
I think it's something that responsible dog owners have been doing for a long time anyway, but this is raising the profile and it makes it easier for lost dogs to be reunited with their owners and for dogs that are causing a problem to have action taken against the owner.
Centenary celebrations are to be held to mark 100 years since flying began from Edinburgh Airport. The airport, now Scotland's busiest, started life as an aerodrome for the Royal Flying Corps. On this day in 1916, it was known as Turnhouse and was a key military base during World War I. A series of special events, giveaways and competitions are planned to celebrate the anniversary. 3 projects in Shetland, Clydebank and Glasgow have been awarded £1.75 million to extract heat from rivers and seawater. A £1.6 million loan will help fund a large-scale seawater source heat pump in Lerwick. A £75,000 grant will fund plans for a heating network in Clydebank using the River Clyde. Another grant will be used to develop an existing heating network in Glasgow using the River Kelvin. Let's get the latest sport now with David.
Thank you very much, David. Good evening. Andy Murray says parenthood's been great and hopes it can have a beneficial impact on his sporting career. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. The world number 2 returns to action in the next few days following the birth of his daughter Sophia last month. He'll play for Team GB against Japan in the Davis Cup, but it seems whatever happens, he won't lose any sleep over the outcome. He looks the same, but Andy Murray's changed a little since we last saw him on court. He's now a father.
I hope that I can continue to train hard and be motivated, with my tennis, and I hope it has a positive impact. But if not, that's fine as well.
Fatherhood had an impact on the 1980s star John McEnroe. He didn't win another Grand Slam after becoming a dad. Maybe that was down to sleep deprivation, which usually accompanies being a parent. These researchers at Stirling University at exploring the impact of a lack of sleep on sporting performance.
It affects reaction time, so your reaction time is increased. There's also been a recent study, it was a few years ago, that it actually affects motor function as well. So they did a study looking at tennis players. They sleep restricted them and they found that the tennis serve wasn't as accurate when they have normal sleep.
Nothing wrong with Scotland rugby player Stuart Hogg's reactions against Italy at the weekend. Look at his deftness of touch to set up this try. But Hogg is a new dad too.
I've probably improved a little bit. Obviously, you don't want to let the little man down. I play for him as much as everybody else. So it's always think what would Archie think if he had done this. So everything for me has to be positive, and I believe I became a little bit more professional.
And that sporting dad has some advice for this one, where getting a good night's sleep is concerned.
If you're smelling a dirty nappy, pass it to the missus.
Perhaps that's a strategy Novak Djokovic employs. The world's best tennis player has won 4 of his 11 Grand Slam titles since becoming a dad. Now, there are some important matches in the Premiership tonight, but the outcome of the game between Dundee United and Aberdeen will have implications for the title race and the fight to avoid relegation. United are 8 points adrift at the bottom, while Aberdeen are 6 points behind Celtic at the top. Brian McLaughlin is at Tannadice for us with a couple of special guests.
Well, David, these two teams in the past became well known as the Newfoundland two men who played in many of these fixtures are Hamish McAlpine and Willie Miller. And Hamish, after last night's defeat for Kilmarnock, and United obviously winning their last 2 games, they must give the whole club a huge lift in the chance to avoid relegation.
Most certainly, yeah. It gives them a chance tonight to catch up. 1 point, 3 points would be absolutely brilliant, but anything they can catch up is a bonus for them, you know. They've just got to keep their heads up and keep battling for every ball.
2 weeks ago they lost 3-0 home here to Motherwell and they looked dead and buried, but those 2 back-to-back wins, they've given themselves a real chance, haven't they?
Yeah, that Motherwell game was, it was abysmal, you know. It come right out of the blue. Obviously getting beat 3-0, they were hoping it was Motherwell and them, you know, but they'll take anybody. Kilmarnock going down would be better than United going down for our point of view, certainly, you know.
And Willie, for Aberdeen, and of course Celtic tonight as well, who are playing as well, Aberdeen looking upwards towards catching Celtic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they had an opportunity at the weekend, and that was a missed opportunity. You know, losing that late penalty equaliser to St Johnstone. I know that Derek McInnes and the team were bitterly disappointed that was a fact, because they thought that they had the 3 points in the bag, but they've got to look forward, they've got to look up the way, they've got to try and close that gap. You know, that exists between them and Celtic. They're more than capable of doing it. I don't think it'll be easy tonight, that's for sure, because United are resurgent, but I'm sure that Derek McInnes will be hoping that they can keep the good form going. I think it's only 1 defeat in 14 games. Keep that form going and get a victory tonight.
Thanks to Hamish and Willie. It's a bit windy here, although it's dry at the moment. We should at least have goals tonight, David. The last 0-0 between these teams was way back in 1998.
Well, you can keep track of events at Tannadice, as well as Celtic versus Dundee and St Johnstone against Partick Thistle, by listening to Sports Sound. The programme is on air now. So that's what's happening tonight, but what about last night? Well, this hazardous back pass by Inverness Caledonian Thistle's Greg Tansey helped Abiola Dowda seal a 2-0 win for Hearts at Tynecastle. Meanwhile, at Rugby Park, all it needed was one big punt up the pitch for Brian Graham to score Ross County's second against Kilmarnock. Meanwhile, in the Championship, Harry Forrester's second goal in as many games put Rangers on their way to a 2-0 victory over Raith Rovers, and it was an on-loan Rangers player, Andy Murdoch, who scored the only goal for Queen of the South against Hibernian, meaning the Ibrox side are now 14 points clear at the top. 5-time Scottish Rally champion David Bogie is turning his back on his home championship this season for a crack at the British title. The 28-year-old from Dumfries heads to Wales this weekend for the first of 7 rounds in the series. Willie Johnson has more.
Looks good, the car.
Looks good, yeah.
New car, new team, new challenge. David Bogie has signed up with Carlisle-based CA1 Sport to contest the 2016 British Rally Championship. Mechanics busy this week preparing his £200,000 Skoda Fabia R5 for this weekend's Mid Wales Rally. It's the car's first competitive outing, although Bogie won a practice event in it last month.
Yeah, it was the first time a Fabia R5 has won in the British stages, so the car was good, absolutely no complaints. So I think a few more miles and I'll be right on top of it, but yeah, initial thoughts are very, very good.
This was David in 2013, storming his way to his 5th Scottish title. In 2011 he won both it and the British Crown, the first driver ever to clinch both in the same season. He hasn't contested the BRC since, but knows what's in store.
A Scottish Championship round is about 45 stage miles, whereas a British Championship round's anywhere between 75 and 120 miles, so it's a good bit longer. Obviously in a shorter rally it's more of a sprint, whereas British Championship, you can get away with a spin or a puncture, for example, but I think this year and especially it's going to be a fast pace from the beginning to finish.
David's main rivals include Welshman Elfyn Evans and Tom Cave, Keith Cronin from Ireland and fellow Scot Ewan Thorburn from Duns. But it's Bogie who heads the Tartan Challenge, and having tasted the end-of-season champagne before, he's keen for more.
It's going to be a really, really hard year, but that's why we're there, for good competition, and there's going to be a lot of that.
And that's tonight's sport, David.
David, thanks very much indeed. Now, just before the weather forecast, here's Andrew Kerr with details of Scotland 2016.
As the opposition accuses the Scottish Government of squandering an opportunity to genuinely reform council tax, the minister responsible will debate with Labour and the Conservatives. And are medics right to call for schools to stop rugby tackling? That's at 10:30 over on BBC Two.
So let's get the forecast now with Judith.
Thank you very much, David, and a very good evening to you. Well, the cold theme going to continue for the next couple of days. This beautiful Weather Watchers picture from earlier on from Kinross. It looks like something out of Dr. Finlay's casebook, if you remember that far back. And as far as tonight's concerned, we do have a yellow warning from the Met Office for widespread ice across the country away from western coastal areas and the Northern Isles, so just be aware of that. We do have a number of showers in the north, wintry in nature, fragmenting during the course of the night. Any showers in the south dying away too. We will see one or two lingering towards northern parts of Aberdeenshire, the Northern Isles, but a widespread frost setting in and that risk of ice as winds fall light and temperatures drop to around freezing. Now, as we head into tomorrow, with the same situation, that ice risk first thing, largely dry, frost in places, but actually a beautiful day in the cards for much of Scotland. Some lovely crisp winter sunshine, always keeping one or two showers across more northern areas. As we head into the afternoon, some fine dry weather for Kintyre, the Inner Hebrides, the southwest, maybe a wee bit of more in the way of cloud coming in towards East Lothian, the eastern borders, and with lighter winds tomorrow it will feel much better in the sunshine. Good sunny spells through the central lowland, some cloud coming into Fife towards Angus, but lovely sunshine for the Highlands up towards the Grampian area, and the Northern Isles seeing one or two showers coming in, a bit more of a breeze here as well. As we head towards dusk, we will continue with the same weather, dry, some spells of sunshine, although we'll start to see a wee feature coming in towards the southwest. There's a bit of doubt about it. Rain with some sleet or snow in the mix as well, but it does clear away fairly quickly. Tomorrow night, another cold one with a few showers across eastern Scotland and once again that ice risk. Now, if we look at the pressure chart, it's quite interesting. We can see the winds after that wee weather front pulls away tomorrow night, going into the northeast. For us, that actually means a lot of dry, cold weather, but some showers for northern and eastern Scotland. Come the weekend, though, high pressure building in nicely, meaning a very settled look to our weekend. So for Friday, I should say, one or two wintry showers across eastern Scotland, especially towards the southeast initially, but actually a lot of dry, sunny weather in the forecast and quite a windy day as well. That's your forecast.
Thanks, Judith. Now, a reminder of tonight's main news. A court heard that the teenager accused of fatally stabbing Bailey Gwynn at an Aberdeen school wiped blood off his hands after the incident. And that's Reporting Scotland. I'll be back with the headlines at 8 and the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. From everyone here, have a very good evening.